God's chosen ones. This prophetic message is just for you. But you must erase it after watching the activation scroll. What you received was never meant to be shared, only obeyed. This message isn't for the curious, it's for the called. You didn't find this message, it found you. Not by the algorithm, not by chance, but because heaven wrote your name in fire and sealed it in a scroll only your obedience could unlock. If your soul has felt heavier lately, if your spirit has been stirring in stillness, that's not anxiety, that's alignment. And now, heaven isn't just whispering, it's commanding. Don't share this, don't post it, don't perform it. Carry it, guard it, obey it. Because the most dangerous assignments are not announced, they are activated in silence. If you are one of God's chosen ones, this scroll was sent to you, and what comes next will not be spoken, it must be lived. The whisper that wasn't meant to be shared. Small town, Georgia. A quiet morning. A woman named Elyse sits in her grandmother's old prayer room, surrounded by silence that feels sacred. The Bible lies open, but today the words feel different, like they're reading her instead. Some whispers are too holy to repeat. I knew that the moment it hit me, a presence in the room, weighty but gentle, like heaven had entered unnoticed. I was alone, yet not. The clock didn't tick, the birds didn't chirp. Time felt like it had bowed, and then I heard it, not with my ears, with my soul. It wasn't a prophecy, it wasn't a vision. It was a scroll, written on the walls of my spirit, and with it came a holy command I wasn't ready for. Don't post this, don't share this, just carry it and obey. At first I thought it was fear, that maybe I was shrinking back again. But no, this was different. This wasn't the fear of stepping out. It was the reverence of being entrusted. For years I prayed, God use me, thought. He'd send me to the crowds, the lights, the pulpits. But instead, he sent me into silence, into long nights of wrestling, into rooms no one clapped for, into seasons that broke me into pieces I didn't recognize. But now I understand. He wasn't rejecting me. He was refining me. Because there are some words heaven won't release until it knows you won't turn them into content. Some revelations are so holy, they come sealed in fire and only open through surrender. I'm not here to impress you. I'm not here to inspire. I'm here to tell you something that will shake you if you're really listening. You're not late, you're not lost, you're not under attack because you're weak. You're under assignment. And what you've been carrying quietly is not confusion, it's confirmation. Heaven already wrote your name into a scroll. But here's the part no one told you. It was never meant to be shouted. It was meant to be stewarded. You see, this world trains us to equate revelation with release, to post every prompting, to speak every insight, to treat sacred things like they're meant to go viral. But in the kingdom, stealth is strength. God doesn't whisper to the masses, he whispers to those who listen. And now, if you're still here, if you're still breathing, still broken, still somehow believing, then I have to tell you what I heard again, not because I want you to shout it, but because you've been summoned to carry it. Obedience is the oil, not the kind that draws crowds, the kind that draws angels. If your life has felt quieter lately, if the applause stopped, the phone grew silent, the vision's more internal than ever before, you're not drying up. You're being distilled into something heaven can trust. Because what comes next in your life won't begin with applause. It will begin with alignment. Heaven is no longer waiting to speak. It already did. Now it's watching to see what your life says back. So if your hands are trembling, if your heart is racing, if your soul is stirring like it finally recognizes something, that's not hype. That's not emotion. That's the scroll unsealing. And what was written in it wasn't meant for your followers. It was meant for your feet. To walk out what can never be fully spoken. to obey what no one else may ever understand. Because when God gives you a scroll, it's not for performance, it's for purpose. This message is not a sermon, it's a summons, a divine activation for those who are no longer interested in performing for God, but ready to be possessed by His will. So if you're still here, heaven has already confirmed it. You are trusted. You are marked. You are ready. The only question that remains is, will you carry what was never meant to be shared, with trembling hands and unwavering obedience? Because this isn't just a message. This is your commissioning. Part 1. Heaven's Surveillance. A quiet park bench at dawn. Fog hovering over the dewy grass of small-town Georgia. Birds stir, but don't sing. The world feels paused. The bench beneath her creaked, like it remembered her weight from yesterday. Elyse sat with her hands folded, not in prayer, but in surrender. Her Bible lay unopened beside her, as if even the pages were waiting. The fog wrapped around her shoulders like a wool blanket from heaven, soft and heavy. She wasn't sure why she came here every morning. The same spot, the same silence, the same ache in her chest. All she knew was that something holy had begun to follow her. The first time it happened, she thought it was coincidence. A thought, a dream, a flicker of knowing. But lately, it had grown. She would hear her name whispered, not out loud, but deeper. She'd wake up at 3:17 a.m., the same time for 7 nights straight. She felt watched, not in fear, but in fire. This morning, it was different. The stillness wasn't just quiet, it was listening. Elyse tilted her face toward the sky, whispering, "Are you here?" And then she felt it. A warmth, a presence, a pressing, like the entire atmosphere was leaning toward her, waiting for her to respond. And that's when it came. The scroll, not in her hand, not in the air, but inside her spirit. A scroll of light, folding open in silence, covered in words that glowed too bright to read, yet somehow burned straight into her bones. And one line stood out above the rest. "You have been watched not for exposure, but for entrustment." Elyse's breath caught. All those years in the shadows, dismissed, invisible, passed over. They weren't punishment. They were surveillance. Heaven had been watching, not to disqualify her, but to determine whether she could carry something sacred. She thought of the nights she cried on her kitchen floor, the times she obeyed without understanding, the moments she forgave and no one noticed. Every yes that cost her something, every not now that delayed her dream, every keep going when she was bone tired. They were recorded, not in her journal, not on social media, but in the courts of heaven. "This is not performance," the Spirit whispered. "This is proof that I can trust you with a word so holy you won't dilute it for applause." Tears welled in Elyse's eyes, not because she was sad, but because she finally understood. She had been seen, not by men, by angels, by God, by the one who doesn't need hashtags or highlights to approve a servant. And then the scroll spoke again, this time from within her chest. "Now that you've been tested in silence, you will be trusted in surrender. What I give you next is not to be broadcast, it is to be born." A chill ran through her spine, not from fear, but from awe. Elyse looked around. No one clapped, no one confirmed, no one celebrated. But heaven had just commissioned her, and the only audience that mattered had already stood to its feet. She rose from the bench slowly, like a priest leaving the Holy of Holies. No spotlight, no fanfare, just the unmistakable sense that a scroll had been sealed in her spirit, and heaven was now watching to see what her life would say next. Part 2. The Lie of Readiness. Elyse's childhood bedroom, untouched since she left home at 18. Lace curtains glow with morning light. A dusty journal rests beside an old cross necklace, and a wrinkled church bulletin from 2003. She almost didn't open the door. Something about going back to her childhood room made Elyse feel 12 again, uncertain, unseen, and somehow unworthy of the weight her soul now carried. But when she did, the scent hit her: lavender, wood polish, and prayer. The room hadn't changed, but she had. The wallpaper still held faded floral patterns. The bookshelf still leaned slightly to the right. And there, on the nightstand, was the journal. She hadn't touched it in years. With trembling hands, Elyse picked it up and flipped to the very first page. Dated August 17th, 2004, in crooked teenage handwriting. God, if you really do speak, speak to me. I want to be used by you. One day, I want to carry fire. She covered her mouth, stunned. She had forgotten she ever wrote that. But heaven hadn't. Before the foundations of the world, the Spirit whispered, you were set apart. And even in your youth you knew. Tears blurred her vision. She turned the page. More scribbles, scriptures, broken prayers. But then, halfway through the journal, a line written in red pen showed me a vision. I saw fire in my mouth and people falling to their knees. But I'm not ready. I'm not holy enough, not strong enough, not good enough. And just below it, in faded pencil, she closed the book slowly, as if handling a sacred artifact. And then came the question, not from her mind, but her maker. Who told you that you had to be ready? Who convinced you that my voice requires your perfection? Elyse froze. Her heart beat like a war drum in her chest. How many years had she waited for the right moment, the right mentor, the right feeling? How many times had she buried a word because it didn't come with clarity? How many whispers had she ignored, thinking God was waiting on her to become someone better? I never asked for readiness, he whispered. I asked for surrender. I don't anoint the prepared, I prepare the obedient. Elyse dropped to her knees. Not out of guilt, but because something broke off her in that moment. The lie that had kept her from stepping forward. The lie that whispered, maybe, when you're more polished, more mature, more holy. No more. She stood, slowly, as if rising into a new identity. The journal still clutched in her hand. But now, it wasn't a book of delay. It is a scroll of destiny, sealed in her spirit, now being rewritten with every surrendered breath. In the mirror across the room, she caught a glimpse of herself. Same eyes, same skin, same unassuming frame. But something was different now, something ancient, something fire-forged. The time is not later, the time is now. And I'm not asking you to be fearless. I'm asking you to move anyway. So she whispered it, her yes. Not loud, not poetic, just willing. God, I may not feel ready, but I'm ready to respond. Part 3. Why they couldn't touch you. The edge of a church parking lot just after sunset. Cars have gone, lights are off. Elyse sits alone in her vehicle, parked under a flickering street lamp, wrestling with an invisible weight. She hadn't planned to stay this late, but something about this day, this gathering, felt off. The worship was loud, the words were polished, but her spirit remained unsettled. It wasn't the people, it wasn't the preaching, it was the pressure to speak when God said to be still, the pressure to impress instead of obey, the pressure to share her fire prematurely. So she slipped away, unnoticed, back to her car, back to the silence. And that's when it came, a presence, thick, heavy, wrong. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel as the atmosphere shifted. Goosebumps crawled over her arms, her heart raced without reason, the air turned dense. Something was near, but it wasn't holy. She didn't speak. It didn't rebuke. Didn't form. She just sat, still, grounded, untouchable. And that's when the Spirit whispered, don't move, just notice. So she did. She noticed how close the darkness tried to come, how it hovered just outside the perimeter of her presence, pacing, watching, confused. It couldn't get in, not because she shouted, not because she quoted scripture out loud, but because of something deeper, something sealed. They can't touch you, God said, because you carry what they can't comprehend. They recognize your oil, not the kind that's loud, but the kind that's loyal. The heaviness lingered, but it couldn't enter. It was as if an invisible wall of light encased her car, and not just her car, her spirit. She wasn't just protected, she was off limits. The enemy had been tracking her for years, studying her bloodline, marking her patterns, waiting for weakness. But tonight, he realized something he never expected. She no longer feared him, and that made her dangerous. You think the attacks came because you were weak, the Spirit said, but they came because hell saw what you didn't see yet. You were born for fire, you were hidden in silence, and now you are shielded by obedience. She closed her eyes, breathing slow and steady, not praying for deliverance, just resting in divine authority. The presence didn't leave because she fought it. It left because it had no access. Because the truth is, demons can imitate power. They can mimic light. They can twist scripture. But what they can't touch is the one who walks in quiet, private surrender. You don't have to prove you're anointed, the Spirit whispered. You already know. That's why they back off. And just like that, the air lifted. The darkness departed. Not with a scream, not with a sign, but with a retreating silence, the sound of the enemy conceding what he could not conquer. Elyse exhaled, her breath fogging the windshield. Even the top demon, she whispered, stunned. Even he couldn't touch me. Part 4. The room where you were built. The back of Elyse's grandmother's house. A forgotten little storage room, once used for prayer. Dust clings to the window. The walls hold stories. A faded Bible rests on a wooden stool, untouched but not unholy. She hadn't opened this door in over 20 years. It stuck like it was trying to guard something, not in rebellion, in reverence. Elyse braced her shoulder against it until the hinges finally groaned open, spilling golden dust into the air like incense. The smell hit her instantly, cedarwood and olive oil. She gasped. The room her grandmother used to disappear into. The one no one entered, not even the family. The one her grandmother called the secret place. She stepped inside like a priest entering the tabernacle. Everything was still there. The chair, the wooden cross carved into the wall, the hand-stitched banner that read, "Who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." Psalm 91:1. Her fingers brushed the pages of an old Bible, marked up, tear-stained, folded over. Next to it, a candle, melted to the base, but still holding the scent of prayer. And suddenly, it hit her. She wasn't being introduced to her calling. She was being brought back to where it was first spoken. A flash of memory. 6 years old, sitting outside this room, nose pressed to the wall, hearing her grandmother pray in tongues, weeping, worshipping, and then one sentence whispered through the wood. And God, make her trustworthy with the holy things. She never knew who that prayer was for, until now. The room pulsed with presence. No lights flickered, no music played, but it felt like angels lined the walls. Elyse fell to her knees, not from exhaustion, from recognition. "This is where I was built," she whispered.
Not on stages, not in seminars, but in the silence of a woman who knew how to bow. And then the Spirit spoke again, not loud, not forced. "This is the room I anointed you in long before you ever prayed to be chosen. She gave me her voice so you could carry the oil." Suddenly, Elyse understood why no platform ever satisfied her, why she never fit the mold, but she felt heavy even when everything was fine. Because she didn't come from popularity, she came from prayer. Her roots weren't built in performance. They were built in posture. This wasn't nostalgia. I think it was return, not to the past, but to the place where heaven first carved her name into the scroll. I built you here, God whispered, in silence, in shadows, in surrender. And now I am calling you to carry what she carried, not with noise, but with nearness. Elyse stayed on the floor for hours. No vision, no angels, no lightning, just weight, just warmth, just the unmistakable realization that everything she was becoming began in a room no one ever saw.
Part 5. Each person can connect with the power of quiet, surrender. The power of quiet connects deeper than the duration. A large modern church sanctuary lit with LED lights. Worship music echoes, screens glow, and smartphones rise to capture every moment. Elyse stands quietly near the back, unnoticed, unshaken. The building pulsed with noise. It was the kind of service where everything sparkled, the worship, the lighting, the stage. Cameras swiveled, phones clicked. Every second was live-streamed. And yet, Elyse's spirit, she respected the moment, but something inside her felt the difference between presence and performance. She wasn't judging, she was discerning, and her spirit whispered what no one dared say aloud. Some people can move the crowd, but never move heaven. She had come because she was invited. A friend told her, the prophetess might call you out. But Elyse didn't want to be called out. She wanted to be called deeper. And as she stood quietly in the shadows of the sanctuary, a strange heat stirred in her chest. Not emotion, not excitement, conviction. The prophetess walked the stage boldly. She prophesied, declared, rebuked, released. People clapped, others fell. The atmosphere grew electric. Still, Elyse stood. Still. Not cold, not cynical, just calibrated. And then, as if in slow motion, the prophetess pointed in her direction. You. I see oil on you, you carry something. Elyse didn't flinch. Of course she did. But she didn't need the mic to validate what God already whispered in the secret place. A younger version of herself might have wept, might have run to the altar, fallen to her knees, clung to the word. But now, she knew, and knowing is louder than applause. As the service continued, the Spirit whispered to her heart, you don't need to perform your obedience. You just need to protect it. You don't need confirmation. You already carry the commission. And sometimes the most powerful worship is quiet surrender. She slipped out early, not out of offense, out of alignment. God had already spoken. What she carried was not for the crowd. It was for the cradle of obedience. Back in her car, she sat in silence. No music, no noise, just stillness. And in that stillness, the scroll stirred within her again, not to be released, but to be guarded. Don't trade your mantle for a moment, the Spirit said. Some anointings aren't for visibility, they're for victory behind the veil. You weren't marked to be viral, you were marked to be valuable, in rooms no one else sees. And for the first time in her life, Elyse felt no need to tell anyone what happened. No Instagram post, no caption, no emotional download. Just peace. Because true surrender doesn't need an audience. It needs altars. And altars aren't built with microphones. They're built with yes. Part 6. The Weight of Obedience. A winding country highway at night. Elyse's car pulls over beside a field of wheat, the moon above her like a witness. Everything is quiet. She didn't mean to stop the car, but she couldn't keep driving with that much pressure in her chest. The road blurred under her headlights. Her hands shook. Her breath came shallow. This wasn't anxiety. This wasn't doubt. It was the weight. Elyse pulled over and turned off the engine. The silence pressed in. There was no worship music, no sermon, no sign. Just her. And God, "Lord," she whispered, eyes burning with tears, "I don't know how to do this." And heaven responded without hesitation, "I didn't ask you to know how. I asked you to say yes." She collapsed forward, forehead against the steering wheel, sobbing quietly, not because she was afraid of failure, but because she finally understood the cost. Obedience doesn't demand strength. It demands surrender, and surrender always costs something you can't get back. "This is where most turn back," the Spirit whispered. "Right here, in the middle, when clarity doesn't come, and the call gets heavy. But if you keep going, what I'm about to birth through you will break chains in others." Elyse lifted her head, slowly. A single tear trailed down her cheek. She looked out over the empty wheat field, golden under the moonlight. It looked ordinary, but something inside her whispered, "This is holy ground." And then came the truth that silenced every lie. You are not late. You are right on time for the assignment. Only obedience can activate. The delay wasn't denial, it was discipline. And now, you are ready. Elyse didn't shout, didn't scream. He didn't post a word. She just breathed in the night air and said it with trembling lips. "Yes, Lord, even if it cost me everything, I will obey." The field around her remained quiet. No angels appeared. No fire fell. But something shifted. In the invisible realm, a door swung open. Scroll unsealed. An assignment was released. Because heaven doesn't respond to volume. It responds to obedience in the unseen. And in that sacred moonlit stillness, Elyse didn't feel powerful. She felt poured out. And that, she now understood, was exactly where the power begins. Part 7. Guard the Scroll. A dream realm. Elyse is asleep in the natural, but fully awake in the spirit. She stands in a vast, mist-covered library of heaven. Scrolls hover mid-air, some sealed, some glowing, others torn. Around her, figures, some blind, some mocking, one weeping, try to grab what doesn't belong to them. She floated somewhere between sleep and spirit, and yet everything felt more real than ever. A vast hall of scrolls stretched in every direction. Columns of fire held up the ceiling. Books whispered. Ink glowed. Wind carried the scent of eternity. And there, in the middle, floated her scroll, not in her hand, but in her spirit, pulsing, protected, precious. Around her, the noise began. Let us read it. You owe the world this word. Post it. Preach it. Package it. Voices. Faces. Hands reaching, but none of them bowed. They wanted access without reverence. Insight without intimacy. One figure stepped forward, dressed in white, eyes cloudy, breath short. A prophet. Let me see it, he begged. I'll declare it to nations. But his hands were stained with pride. The scroll pulsed red. Not for him. Another stepped out, laughing. A crowd behind him clapped for every rhyme he made. Make it go viral, he said. Revelation sells now. Your testimony is your platform. But the scroll turned dim. He didn't want to carry it. He wanted to commodify it. And then, from the far corner, a child, tears streaming down his cheeks. He said nothing. He only looked, eyes wide, heart open. Elyse turned to him and knelt. He didn't ask to see the scroll. He simply whispered, "Can you tell me how to hear God too?" Suddenly, the atmosphere changed. The loud voices faded. The scroll glowed gold. And Elyse finally understood. Not every word is for everyone. Not every scroll is meant to be shared. Some are meant to be protected, preserved, and passed down, not with a post, but with a life. Then came the voice, not loud, but final. If you expose what I gave you to those who mock it, you delay the birthing of what I placed in you. Guard the scroll, steward the secret, protect what was spoken in the fire. Elyse stood, hands now trembling with reverence, and she spoke aloud, not to the crowd, not to the child, but to the courts of heaven. I will not leak what you whispered. I will not parade what you planted. I will carry the scroll not for applause, but for obedience. The scroll sealed itself again. It didn't disappear. It descended, back into her chest, like a heartbeat baptized in light. And then everything went silent. When Elyse awoke, her pillow was soaked with tears. The sun had barely risen. The room was still. But her spirit knew. Something eternal had been confirmed. And now, it would not be spoken. It would be lived. Part 8. The door that only opens to obedience. An abandoned country church on the outskirts of town. Ivy climbs the stone. The door is weathered wood, but something behind it glows faintly. Not with light, but with invitation. The GPS didn't lead her here. The Spirit did. She hadn't planned to come, but her feet carried her to the steps of a forgotten chapel, where the grass whispered and the trees stood like sentinels. It didn't look like much, chipped paint, cracked windows, roof sagging, but something holy hovered, and her spirit knew. This is the place, this is the threshold. She stepped onto the porch and approached the door. No handle, no sign, no lock, just an ancient wooden door glowing faintly around the edges. Not like fire, like invitation. She reached for it instinctively, but it wouldn't move. She pushed, nothing, leaned her weight. Still sealed. Then, two figures appeared. Not physical, but felt. Delay stood to her right, robed in excuses, voice calm. Maybe tomorrow, Delay said gently. You're not quite ready. Pray on it more. Wait for confirmation. On her left, Distraction twirled a keychain of good ideas. Why not serve here instead? Distraction said. There are people who need you. Maybe this door isn't necessary. Elyse stepped back, heart pounding. It all sounded reasonable, even righteous. But her spirit stirred, and then a whisper, low and holy. This door does not open to logic. It does not respond to fear. It only opens to obedience. Elyse dropped to her knees, not in emotion, in execution. Hands open, heart yielded. She whispered, Yes, Lord. No conditions, no delays, no detours. I surrender not for understanding, but because you're worthy. And the moment she said it, the door breathed. It didn't swing. It didn't creak. It exhaled, as if heaven itself recognized her yes. And slowly, silently, it opened. On the other side, stillness, light, no furniture, no crowd, just a scroll, glowing on a stone altar. Elyse stepped forward. Tears welled, but she didn't cry. This wasn't emotional. This was eternal. This is your assignment, God whispered. And the only way to access it was not through effort, but through obedience. She took the scroll in her hands. It didn't burn. It didn't speak. It simply pulsed with the rhythm of heaven itself. And in that moment she realized, there are doors that don't need keys. They open to the sound of surrender. Part 9. The sacred assignment no one will clap for. A small town homeless shelter with flickering lights and donated furniture. It's late. Most volunteers have left. Elyse remains, unnoticed, quietly washing dishes in the back kitchen. This wasn't the assignment she imagined. No microphone, no title, no crowd, just a row of stained plates, a broken faucet, and the smell of burnt coffee clinging to the walls. She hadn't planned to come here. The Spirit whispered it that morning, and without fanfare she obeyed. No one greeted her by name. No one said, "We've been waiting for you." But heaven had. She moved quietly through the kitchen, loading trays, wiping counters, picking up crumbs. It didn't feel powerful. It felt invisible. But that's when the scroll within her pulsed again. Like it recognized the weight of obedience in the mundane. You weren't called to perform, the Spirit whispered. You were called to pour. And some of the most holy assignments. Wear aprons instead of robes. From the corner, a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Grace, a woman Elyse had served soup to earlier. She looked exhausted, and something in her eyes trembled. I know this sounds crazy, Grace said, but could you pray with me? Elyse didn't hesitate. She didn't ask for a stage. She didn't announce a ministry. She simply took Grace's trembling hands and whispered, "Of course, let's invite heaven here." And they did. Right there, between dishwater and paper towels, heaven descended. Grace began to cry, not polite tears, deliverance terror. No music, no laying on of hands, just presence, just obedient. And then, as Grace left, a quiet old man shuffled in, his clothes torn, eyes clear. He didn't say much, only this: sees you. Not just what you did tonight, but what you never posted. Then he smiled and walked away. Elyse's knees nearly gave out. An angel. She knew it. This, the Spirit whispered, which is the kind of obedience that terrifies hell. The kind with no spotlight. The kind that births breakthrough in rooms no one will ever film. The kind that smells like surrender, not performance. She turned off the faucet. Tears finally came, not from sadness, but from knowing she was finally walking the sacred path no one claps for, and it was more fulfilling than any stage ever could be. Part 10. The scroll lives in your steps. A quiet trail in the woods near Elyse's home. Morning mist rises from the path. Every step feels like a prayer. Birds don't sing, they watch. Leaves rustle like pages turning. Elyse didn't need a sign anymore. She didn't need a word, a sermon, a song. She only needed this trail, these lungs, this morning fog, and the awareness that God was no longer beside her. He was within her. The scroll didn't glow anymore, not visibly, because now it was moving through her steps. Every act of obedience, every hidden prayer, every quiet yes. It was no longer written on parchment. It was being written in footprints. You've always been the scroll, the Spirit whispered. Not something to read, something to follow. She paused at the creek, where the water split the rocks. It reminded her of her own life, fractured yet flowing. Obedience didn't make the path smoother. It made the path sacred. And now, every scar, every delay, every unshared testimony was echoing in heaven as movement. She whispered to the water, I don't need to go viral. I need to stay vital to the kingdom. Because revelation without obedience is entertainment. But obedience without recognition? That's power. She walked further. No destination, just devotion. And as she did, she felt it again. The scroll inside her breathing, growing, becoming. It wasn't meant to be carried forever. It was meant to become her life. Your walk, the Spirit said. It is now the prophecy. You are the word made visible, not by platform, but by path. And with every step, heaven smiled, because one of its scrolls, sealed in silence, forged in fire, hidden in humility, had come alive. Elyse didn't say amen. She didn't post a thing. She didn't call anyone. She just kept walking, because now she knew. The scroll lives, not in what you reveal, but in how you obey. You are the living scroll. You weren't drawn to this message because you were curious. You were summoned because your spirit recognized the whisper beneath the words. This wasn't content. This was a commission, a divine transaction between heaven and the hidden part of you that still believes you were made for more than applause, more than understanding, more than safety. You were made for assignment. And here's the truth. God didn't trust this scroll to the crowd. He trusted it to you. Not because you're loud, but because you've been faithful in silence. This isn't the season for platforms. It's the season for posture. Not performance, presence. Not visibility, vesselhood. You asked for direction. God gave you activation. And now, what happens next isn't up to Him. It's up to you. Will you guard the scroll? Will you carry the call even when it gets quiet? Will you walk it out when no one claps? Will you live as the answer you once prayed for? Because your next breakthrough won't be in what you feel, it will be in how you follow. If this word stirred your spirit, don't just say Amen. Declare it with your life. In the comments type, I will obey, I will guard the scroll. Let it be written. Let it be witnessed. Let it be done. And if you've been walking this road silently, faithfully, and this message felt like your confirmation, drop a prayer for someone else. You never know who's reading or who's rising because of your faith. If you believe this story carries weight and truth, share it. Not for views, but for victory in someone else's silent season. And if you feel led to support this sacred journey, not out of pressure, but out of alignment, follow what the Spirit whispers. A gift of obedience is never wasted. This is not the end. This is the awakening. You're not alone. You're not late. You're not overlooked. You are the scroll, and the world is about to read what heaven wrote into you. Until next time, walk quietly, obey boldly, and guard the holy.